So this week we're going to be looking at a little incident in Jesus' life when he was taking a journey. And on this occasion he's taking a journey between along the border between Galilee and Samaria. Galilee is where the Jews live, that's where Jesus' people live. And Samaria is where the Jews don't live. And historically, the Jews and the Samaritans really don't get on. But Jesus is travelling along this border, and as he's travelling along the border, he comes to the outskirts of a village. And on the outskirts of the village, he's met by this group of 10 lepers. And the lepers call out to him from a distance and they say, "Jesus, Jesus, Son of God, have mercy on us, save us, deliver us, heal us." And what Jesus says to them is, he says, right, go and show yourselves to the priests. And as they go, as they set off towards the priests, they get healed from their leprosy. And you would think that they would all come back and say to Jesus, "Wow, you're amazing, thank you so much." And that's not what happens. What happens is that just one of these lepers comes back and praises God and says to Jesus, "You're amazing." And Jesus just sort of as an aside, Jesus says, weren't all 10 of you healed? And yet you're the only one that has come back. And the one that comes back is the Samaritan. Which kind of indicates or implies that the other 9 of these lepers were Jews. They weren't the foreigner, if you like, as Jesus puts it. But the Jews didn't come back to say thank you, and the Samaritan does. And I think there's quite a lot of really interesting bits and pieces that we can learn from this. Because you see, that implication to start off with, that these lepers consisted of a group that were made up of Samaritans and Jews, is quite unusual, because the Jews and the Samaritans culturally and in terms of their society and in terms of just living their lives were so different from each other. And they would never have mixed, and they would never really have understood each other. That's, I think, what it boils down to. Isn't that what most of the challenges over cultural difference that we experience today boil down to? That we don't actually understand each other, and we don't understand the way that we choose to live in our different cultures and in our different societies. And so you wouldn't have expected this Samaritan and the Jews to be living together, to be living outside the village together. And the reason that they was because they were lepers on the surface of it. So leprosy was this horrendous, disfiguring disease for which there was no cure, and it was highly contagious, or it was considered to be highly contagious. And so if you caught leprosy, you were outcast from your community, from your society, and you kind of formed these little groups outside. And the reason that these lepers were brought together was because they had something that joined them, which was more important, and which brought them together more than the differences that they would have experienced culturally and in their society. So that was why they were together. Actually, they were joined together in their isolation, and that was their link. That was their link. And I've thought, you see, we've come across this before. It's with Jews and Samaritans, and for years or for ages I've tried to think of examples, you know, whether it's racial difference or whether it's kind of like the difference maybe between the Catholics and the Protestants in Northern Ireland during the Troubles, or that kind of uncomfortableness around being around each other, and tried to get examples like that. And I think I've maybe been missing a trick, because today, while I was thinking about this, it hit me. Do you know the difference? It's like the difference between people that are comfortable going to church and people that aren't so comfortable going to church. The difference between the Jews and Samaritans, it's that societal, that cultural difference, whereby if you If you're a person that's been brought up around church, if you're a person that's decided to follow Jesus, if you're that, it's just normal. It's just a usual thing for God to be in your life, to go to church, to have all that culture of being a follower of Jesus is just normal to you. And if that's not your experience, then it can look really different. And you know, if you go to church maybe twice a year for weddings or funerals or something like that, it's a strange place to be. It's a strange place to live. It's a strange place to put yourself. Until something bigger than those cultural differences comes into play and draws us all together. Maybe, you know, for those lepers, it was leprosy. Maybe for some people, it's the threat of illness or when death comes. Maybe it's coronavirus. Maybe it's something that's drawn us all together. It's quite interesting. The commentators and the statisticians are saying that certainly during the first wave of coronavirus, there was more interest in spiritual things from people that would never normally consider themselves to be religious, consider themselves to think about spiritual things. It became a big deal in everybody's life when there was something bigger than our cultural differences and our societal differences drawing us together. And I think that we can live our lives, and I can see this, I think that we can live our lives thinking that there's such a massive gulf between those people that follow Jesus and believe in Jesus and those people that don't, that gulf is almost, you know, impenetrable, that we can't get over it, that it's huge. It's a big, big, big deal. And I don't think that it is that big. I think that it just needs that something to draw us together. I think sometimes if we're considering whether or not to follow Jesus, because it is so weird and it is odd, and I understand that, it's, you know, it is a weird thing, and maybe it's scary, and maybe you think that to fit into the culture and the society around Christianity is going to be a challenge, is going to be different, it's going to require you to think differently and act differently and do different things to what your upbringing, what your culture, what your society at the moment would tell you to do. And I would just say that actually taking that decision to follow Jesus, the analogy that I've got is it's kind of like slipping into a pair of old comfy slippers, rather than trying to fit into a tight pair of high heels and totter around. Do you know what I mean? We think it's going to be so different. We think it's going to be so far outside of our experience and our comfort that actually putting on Christianity is going to make us uncomfortable. And actually, it makes us more comfortable. It's like putting on those slippers and feeling like you've come home. And the societal differences and the cultural differences don't matter that much when we're drawn together by something bigger than us. And the other thing that I wanted to say as well is that Jesus, when he approached these lepers, these lepers didn't come close to Jesus. They weren't allowed to. Because they weren't allowed to go close to anybody, but they kind of shouted at Jesus from a distance, and Jesus heard them. So don't feel that you have to do this and this and this and this and be good and all of this stuff before Jesus will hear you. If you feel like you're distant from Jesus at the moment, whether you've decided to follow him or not, if you feel that you're distant from Jesus, Jesus still hears you from a long way away. And Jesus still helps you from a long way away. And Jesus will still guide you from a long way away. And Jesus will come into your life if you just take that one step. So the lepers as they were going to the priests, while they were on their way. They hadn't got there yet, but they were on their way, and Jesus acted into their lives and healed them. Sometimes we just have to take that one step to see the work of Jesus in our lives. And then just that final thing, and this is probably more for followers of Jesus than for people that might still be thinking about it. The guy that came back, he was the Samaritan. He wasn't the one that you would have expected to come back, because you see, the Jews, even Jewish lepers, the Jews knew all about God, and they had all the background, and they had all the culture, and they knew that God was a miraculous God, and they knew that God would be working in their lives, and they kind of got complacent about it, I think. In our Delight meetings, we've been looking at remembrance, and one of the things that we were talking about last week was that it does us good to actively and consciously remember how God has impacted our lives, and the things that he has done in our lives, and the miraculous, because otherwise we can just put it down to so much circumstance and so much coincidence, and we don't see God working. Remember when you maybe first decided to follow Jesus and you saw God everywhere, because all of a sudden your eyes were opened, like that Samaritan, and you just saw God everywhere. And then sometimes we forget that God is still everywhere and is still working in our lives every single day, and that we need to acknowledge that, and we need to understand that God is busy and that he needs to be praised for that, just like that Samaritan did. We're not as far apart as we sometimes think we are, and that's a good thing. I hope you have a really good week. God bless.